Hello, welcome everyone to another edition of the Magic Sandwich Show. I have with me this evening two fine co-hosts, the Rationalizer, who's now on, I think, is it the second or third time that you've been on?
Oh, it's a second time, but I've phoned in once as well.
And someone that is becoming a constant feature on the show, Almighty Athismo. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
There is no specific topic for this evening. We're going to be taking calls on a number of issues, but there are a couple of things that we thought we might address just to see if we can whet your appetite and encourage you to call in. The first that I want to deal with is in relation to YouTube user Together for Peace, also known as Jack. Jack has actually been on this show before, and if you haven't seen it, it is on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel, Magic Sandwich Show, and you can see all of, well, not all of them, but most of the previous shows are uploaded there. Now what has happened, I should just say, I'm terribly sorry, I should say, if you do want to join the show, you have to send a contact request through Skype to Magic Sandwich Show. Now, I know it's somewhat confusing because on Blog TV we're called Magic Sandwich, on YouTube we're Magic Sandwich Show or something different, but on Skype it is Magic Sandwich Show. So if you want to call in, please send a contact request to that Skype address and include in it, please, the gist of what you want to talk about. We've got a number of callers lined up already, but I'm sure we'll get room for many more. Going back to Jack, recently Jack, I mean, we're talking about in the last day or so, Jack has posted a number of videos on his channel in which he has declared that he is now going to be censoring video responses and comments. The reason for this is that he is unhappy with what he describes as the anti-theist approach of using mockery and ridicule, and also a condescending air. Now, there are a number of problems I have with this attitude. Firstly, I think that if you come onto YouTube, put yourself into the public arena, then you must expect that if you make certain claims and people disagree with them, they're going to respond. I certainly, on my channel, always have video responses accepted without any clearance, and the same with comments. And I get all sorts of insults, and I get criticised, some perfectly justified, others I don't think quite as justified. But Jack seems to have this attitude, as a lot of theists do, that his views should be respected. You shouldn't use ridicule and mockery against him. My attitude is, why the fuck not? He comes onto YouTube, he posts videos in which he makes certain claims for which he has absolutely no evidential basis whatsoever. He makes assertions about what attributes his God has. He makes claims about knowledge of his God which he simply cannot justify. And I'm sorry, I'm supposed to respect somebody who has this attitude? Why? If I came on to YouTube and I made ridiculous claims about the existence of fairies or the existence of Hogwarts based on the fact that it features in a Harry Potter book, then I would expect to be ridiculed. Why is it that I should not ridicule his views and beliefs? Now, if ridicule was the only thing that we had in our armoury, that is to say, let's use his word, the anti-theists, then I think that that probably would be somewhat shabby. It would be like simply using ad hominem attacks rather than dealing with the issues at heart. But what else can you do when people make claims? Let's deal with Venom Fang X, for example. He made a series of videos in his early days which claimed to be scientific and whatever. It was basically copying Ken Hovind, as we all know. And they were totally debunked. He then tried a different line of argument, but effectively was still arguing that he's got evidence. Those videos were debunked. He then did one, the biblical foreknowledge, or scientific knowledge in the Bible. That was trounced. He then recently posted another video in which he tries to make the similar sort of claim. Why is it not possible when all of the evidential arguments that have been dealt with by these people have been totally debunked and dealt with? Why isn't ridicule an option that we should have available to us in our armory? I'm sorry, Jack and other theists, I make no apology. But don't get me wrong, I am not here saying that I don't respect Jack as a person. There is a total difference between respecting someone as a human being and respecting their views. I respect Jack as a human being. I have absolutely no respect for his views whatsoever. One final point on this mini rant before we open it up to the others. Jack always talks about his desire for constructive dialogue between the theists and the atheists. I'll give you an example of what he means by that. He invited me onto his blog TV show shortly before Christmas last year. And, excuse me, I willingly accepted. I have no problem talking about any issue, and unlike Jack, let me just get this in, unlike Jack, I can justify all the positions I hold. He can't. So we go into the show, and beforehand there's an exchange of messages, including what topic was going to be discussed. And I thought what would be interesting to discuss all sorts of interesting theological positions and, you know, his justification for various beliefs. And I put these forward to Jack. Jack's response was, no, I don't want to talk about those. I want to talk about the billboard, atheist billboard campaign, which seemed to me a little bit an odd choice. But hey, it's his show. I don't mind. We talk about that. So he also made it abundantly clear that he didn't want the conversation to be confrontational or aggressive. And I said, that's fine. I have no problem with that. So I went onto his blog show, and we spent about 2 hours talking. This is something that is actually on his YouTube channel. It's audio only, but it's on his YouTube channel. So you can go and check out. If you think I'm misrepresenting what happened, you go and check it out. After about 2 hours of pretty mundane, tedious conversation, there came a point where questions that were being posted in the comments were being dealt with, and Jack was asked whether he accepted the Genesis account of creation as presented in the Bible. And he said that he did. Now, about 10 minutes prior to that, he had also said that he had accepted the theory of evolution, and he had no problem with that. Those two positions seemed to me to be incompatible. So I asked him about that. I said, how is it that you can hold both of those two beliefs? He responded without answering the question. So I asked it again. I said, well, no, that doesn't really deal with it. How do you hold? I mean, they are mutually exclusive, so how can you hold both views? He responded again without answering the question. So, whoa, hang on a second, Jack. No, you're not. How do you do it? How do you hold these two views? At which point, the toys came out of the pram, and he had a wussy fit. He said, this is exactly the sort of confrontational and aggressive conversation that I wanted to avoid. I had to spend the next 10 minutes treating him like a child to calm him down and persuade him to actually continue the conversation. So when Jack talks about constructive dialogue, what he basically means is a wishy-washy conversation in which he can make whatever claims he likes, and you cannot challenge him, because by challenging him or asking to justify it, that is being confrontational and disrespectful. In the same way, again, you can go back and watch it, it's on YouTube. When he was on the show, we had him on the show as a co-host. It ended up with him being asked a question. He made the claim, no one else made this claim, he made the claim about separation from God. And he was asked, what does separation from God mean? For the next 20 minutes, he waffled, refused to answer, said he had answered when he hadn't, and then got, again, the toys were thrown out of the pram. I'm sorry, Jack, it's pathetic. If you come onto YouTube and you make claims which you cannot substantiate, do not expect not to be ridiculed. Now, I have gone on a little bit. I know there are other issues that we're minded to invite you to call in about, but before we go any further, do either Almighty or Rationalizer want to comment on anything I've said so far?
Well, I think that if you argue rationally with someone who believes in the Bible, you can say, they can claim to you, "My God is moral," and then you can point to things in the Bible and say, "Well, this shows that God isn't moral." But they can say, "Well, God is all powerful; it's moral because He says it is." And then you can say maybe, "Well, hell isn't fair." But because God knows best, then obviously the all-powerful God can say that it's fair, and then it is. But evidently, the one thing that God can't do is to make it not ridiculous. So as soon as you point out that it's not ridiculous, they can't say, "Oh, it isn't ridiculous because God's all-powerful and made it not ridiculous," because you could just point at the book and say, "Sorry, but look, it evidently is ridiculous."
Before I come to you, Almighty, there was another point that I did want to make. On two occasions in public forums over the last 3 or 4 weeks, Jack has made the statement that I am dishonest. Now, I've struggled to understand exactly how he's justifying this. I think it becomes a little bit more clear in his videos, as clear as anything that Jack ever says, that what he's referring to is intellectual dishonesty. He also makes a criticism, although not directed at me. I suspect that I was being tarred with the broad brush that he was using, that I was being too simplistic and not seeking to be engaged in a conversation about the nuances of his beliefs and religion. Now, what an extraordinary load of fucking bullshit. How can I deal with the nuances of something which you cannot define? And how dare you call me intellectually dishonest when all I did was to ask you a question which you time and time again failed to answer and have still failed to answer. That is not intellectual dishonesty. You are the one that's being intellectually dishonest. Almighty.
Well, I've only ever really had one discussion with Jack. I tried to really give him the benefit of the doubt. I'd known people who spoke highly of him and some people who absolutely hated him. But obviously when he gets into one of these discussions of his, the honest discussion that he claims to crave and be seeking, he engages in these tactics where he's obviously just trying to run out the clock. And it's really quite frustrating because you point out to him that you know that that's what he's doing, and he just plays dumb. And then accuses you of being dishonest. It really reminds me of that joke that I told you, DPR, the bear joke. Do you remember that? I won't tell the whole thing in its completeness. I could waste the entire show doing it. But basically, you find a group of suckers, and you start telling them the bear joke. And it goes, okay, there's a bear out in the forest, and he gets hungry, so he goes into town to get something to eat. He goes into a convenience store, and he gathers up a bunch of items, and he takes it to the cash register, and the person working, the teller rings it all up, and he says, well, that'll be $26.43. And the bear says, well, I don't have $26.43. And he says, well, why don't you have $26.43? And the bear says, well, I don't have any money. I'm a bear. Bears don't have money. And so the teller lowers the price to $25, and the bear says, well, I don't have $25. He asks why he doesn't have $25. He says, I don't have any money. I'm a bear. And the teller keeps lowering the price, and you keep finding various ways to kind of stretch the joke out and pad it with other little side things. And then, of course, unless the other person you're telling the joke to is a complete imbecile, they'll realize that you're doing it, but you just keep as straight a face as you can and keep denying and say, no. And it really helps if you have other people who are in on the joke, because they can say, well, you're just being impatient. The punchline is really funny. But the only punchline to the joke is when the other person finally rage quits because they're so angry that you've wasted an hour of their time telling this marathon joke with no actual punchline. But it's fucking hilarious if you get the right person who gets angry enough. But that's basically what Jack seems to be doing. Is he's telling the bear joke. He's just trying to run out the clock by talking about things that aren't relevant, often even to the point that he himself raised, and it's really quite frustrating.
Yes, it is, and as I say, I just think it is totally disingenuous of him to suggest that he's after constructive discourse. What is constructive about people waffling on without challenging anything that's being said? I think that Isno God is with us, and I think that he wants to address something in relation to this issue. Are you with us, Isno?
Hi. Thank you for adding me to the call. And what I'd like to add is in relation to Jack. and his latest video. It seems I'm very much in agreement with what DPR has already said about Jack. If you come into a public arena, spouts a lot of shit that you cannot evidence, you should not be surprised that you're going to be criticized and that you'll be chastised in a manner that might not be the most conducive to further debate. But I mean, at that point, what is there really more to say? You've got someone that professes A, B, and C, cannot evidence it, and expects to be treated with utter respect with regard to those beliefs. And he does so because they're religious beliefs. For instance, you wouldn't find someone that would profess something insane. For instance, God gnomes are real and they talk. You would not find someone like that being in a position where they could expect the same amount of respect for the idea, where the idea is, for all intents and purposes, very, very similar to what Jack professes. It's something that cannot be evidenced and something that's absolutely ridiculous. But he thinks because of his religion, he is entitled to some degree of respect, and he's absolutely...
No, I'm terribly sorry. Your microphone is giving a really bad clicking sound that is... It's awful to listen to. Can you wrap it up and put it into a question, or sort your microphone out? That's better. That's much better. No, it isn't.
Sorry about
that.
that.
Yeah, that's better. That's better.
I have no idea what's gone wrong with that.
No, that's fine now. Do carry on.
Well, that's basically all I really wanted to say. It's an expansion of the rant you just had. The other
let me ask you a question then, Isno, and also the other panelists. Do you think that ridicule and mockery is an acceptable weapon in the arsenal of things that can be thrown at atheists in the discussion about issues about the existence of God or not? And I'm restricting it just to that. That's the main issue that I have.
In my opinion, yes, it can. It seems a perfectly valid form of arguments, especially with regard, as long as it's not the only form of arguments. I see no reason in objecting to it, because simply if... What was I going to say? Give me a second.
Sorry, whilst you're thinking,
Sure.
Rationalizer or Mighty, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, Jack says that he wants to have these conversations with non-believers. Obviously, the aim of him having these conversations is to, well, I presume in the hope of having non-believers suddenly believe and agree with what he said. Now, what if the main reason that you can't believe his claims is that you find them completely ridiculous? Can you then not talk to him about how ridiculous you find his religion? Because in talking about how ridiculous it is, the only way you can really express how ridiculous something is to talk about it in jest. So am I then not allowed to tell him how ridiculous I find his religion, just in case he gets upset?
I think Jack's demands actually go further than that, because I think when he makes a claim for which, again, he has no evidence and cannot substantiate, you're not even allowed to question that. That is the level of demand of respect that he is asking for. And it's risible. And as I say, I would repeat the point that were ridicule the only argument that we had, then I think that would be somewhat shabby. But every single piece of evidence, well, Jack doesn't always come up with evidence, but people like Venom Fangex do. Every single piece of evidence they come up, we can deal with every single one. I half scripted a video for YouTube in which I refer to this. It's going to be entitled something like Debating Theists. There are, in my experience from 2.5, 3 years on YouTube, there are no more than 5 different arguments that they advance as evidence of God. And all of them have been utterly debunked. But they try and reword them, they try and find a new spin to put on them. But they don't get any better. So, having dealt with all the evidential arguments, and if people are still not getting the point, then what's wrong with saying or using ridicule and mockery?
I know they do get better because they're more technologically advanced. You've heard of the watchmaker argument. What if you found a watch you knew that it had an intelligent creator, but that's now been revised to what if you find a mobile phone in the desert. I mean, it's clearly a better argument. I was nearly convinced by that one, I must admit.
Yes, we did deal with that at the Magic Sandwich show that was broadcast from Dublin. In fact, PC Myers dealt with it, and I think he dealt with it very well. Almighty, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I watched an episode of the Atheist Experience recently, and a caller came in with the Matt Slick argument having changed absolutely nothing. And I think the two hosts that were on were
which is the Matt Slick argument?
If it's not one, it's the other. There are only two possibilities, and if I make a straw man possibility that I can defeat, ergo I must be right. It's just utter garbage just on its surface. It is. You don't really need any kind of expertise to see that it's fallacious for any claim at all. But he calls in, he argues this, he makes the same argument, he's clearly copying and pasting it because he's reciting it verbatim, and he's reciting it to two hosts that were actually on the last time Matt Slick called, before he had that showdown with Matt Dillahunty. And it's so funny, it's like they throw the same ball at the same speed, at the same level, and we just hit it out of the park, and they're just not keeping score.
What a wonderful analogy, isn't there? Back to you. Was there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, one last thing. I think if you don't criticize their views strongly enough, especially when they can't back it up with evidentiary support, you can really lead them to believe that for some reason it is acceptable that they hold such view, that our opinions are not strong enough, or that we don't oppose them enough, and therefore you'll just generally find that people will continue down the same road, whereas if you strongly chastise them for their factual errors and for the things that they can't back up, I think in some cases you can lead people to question themselves. Why are people laughing at me? No one likes to be laughed at. No one likes to be humiliated. And it can give someone pause for thought, but obviously not Jack. That's all I wanted to add. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you very much indeed. I will remove you. Another issue, and I'll bring in the next caller soon, another issue that strikes me is that there are very good psychological reasons to understand and sympathise why people do believe in God. Now, how patronising is that? Jack, I understand why you believe in God, because you've got a psychological propensity to do so. If you want gloves off, Jack, I'll fucking take the gloves off. But there is a second issue that I did want to raise as a potential topic for conversation this evening. And again, if you would like to appear on the show, do send a contact request to Magic Sandwich Show on Skype, and we will see if we can get you on. We've got a couple of people waiting. But the other issue that I wanted to raise was recently an organisation that has a web page, 1millionmums.com, which seems to be part of the American Family Association, has kicked up a fuss. And again, I don't know whether it's sort of like the same issue. In a way, I think it probably is. But their latest campaign is against a program in America, and the American viewers would probably be familiar with it. Those in America, maybe not. I hadn't heard of it. It's called Dancing with Stars, which I think is probably somewhat similar to Strictly Ballroom in this country. Or I'm not sure. But on the show, they have, amongst other people, Chaz Bono. Now, Chaz Bono is the only child of Sonny and Cher, and he was born a woman, known as, in those days, as Chastity. He has now had surgery and whatever other processes he's had to go through, and he's a transgender. The 1millionmums.com considered this to be absolutely outrageous, and they don't really explain why it is. I'm going to have to change my glasses so I can actually give you what justification they actually offer on their website. But again, it's all religiously based. Now, this is another issue that I have with the respect of the likes of Jack, and sitting back, listening to his comments. without criticism, particularly when his views and his beliefs effectively support bigotry, hatred, and discrimination. Now, I have no doubt you'll say, no, that's totally untrue, I'm not like that. Maybe you're not, Jack. I'm not completely convinced of it. I think you've got some issues about homosexuality. You're not too keen on them, oh yeah, you love the sinner, not the sin, and all that sort of bullshit. No, your religion, and many people that follow your religion, use it to justify exactly this sort of bigotry and prejudice. So, the 1 million mums have a problem with a transgender person being on because it is completely unacceptable and Christians should not watch the show. No excuses. And they talk about pushing the envelope of promoting lesbian, gay, transgender people. But they also, once I found their site, I also found that they had a lot of other things that they had a huge issue with, including something to do with Sesame Street. But as I've talked too much, I'm going to invite Almighty to tell you about their issue with Sesame Street.
Oh, hold on, I was arguing with a troll.
Sorry, I was inviting you to comment about...
Sorry, I was arguing with the troll. Anyway, there's an organization, 1 Million Moms, and they have started this petition that I guess has gotten a gajillion signatures to stop Bert and Ernie from getting married. So then I looked it up, and it turns out they're not getting married, and in typical religious nutter fashion, they've gotten all these petitions to stop something that was never going to happen in the first place. So... I looked it up, and there was actually a comment from a spokesman saying, basically, they're puppets. They have no sexual orientation. Full stop. It was pretty...
Do Bert and Ernie still sleep in the same bed?
I believe they do, but it's been
So,
some time.
so there's no objection to them both sleeping in the same bed, but they object to them sleeping in the same bed after being married.
I think that what they really ought to do is just have them sleep head to foot, just to remove the controversy once and for all.
That's disgusting. I'm sorry, I've somewhat lost touch of who's the next person on. I know that Puppy Turtle wants to come on and discuss something to do with morality, but I thought we had...
Can I just correct something? My wife has just informed me that Bert and Ernie actually sleep in separate beds in the same room. I must have been thinking of Morecambe and Wise or something.
Well, thank you very much for that clarification. We did have someone, a proud Flat Earth Society member, who sent a contact request. Unfortunately, he doesn't seem to be online. I'm sure I accepted the request. Let me just see if I can find him. Just 1 second. Just bear with me. I apologise about this. I know that Headless Chicken, I think, wanted to come on. We'll bring him on. After this, we'll come to you, Puppy, and we'll deal with your question.
As a point of interest, do you know which country is supposed to have the most state-funded sex change operations each year?
The U.S.?
No, it's not
Iran.
Oh, it's Thailand? What?
Iran.
What?
Iran.
No
Iran.
way.
State-funded sexual reassignment operations because they see it as a cure for homosexuality. If you're a man that is sexually attracted to a man, it's because really you're a woman in a man's body, and the cure for your homosexuality is to turn you into a woman.
That's one of those things that in its own way is bizarrely logical.